All right. I just finished The Eyes of the Dragon. And I have to say, I really liked it. I really liked it. Now, it won't be everybody's favorite Stephen King novel. I'm sure it's some people's favorite Stephen King novel. Now I've only read three of them, and I've liked each of them for very, very different reasons, which is so interesting. First, with The Gunslinger, I was just so intrigued by the world building, even though it was very light. I was just intrigued by the main characters and everything going on, and I was so excited. And then The Stand was just this great, like almost an epic, very Western feeling. And and then I get to The Eyes of the Dragon, and it's like this medieval fairy tale. And now that won't be for everyone. It definitely won't be for everyone. But I love that sort of thing. I am a sucker for books like, just simple ones like Alice in Wonderland. Like it's very much a fairy tale thing. I have a big fairy tale tome. It's that purple one. Sometimes you'll see it in like a bookstore. It's the Brothers Grimm one, and I love those stories. I love them, but you have to know what you're getting because they are very different in structure and tone and intent than a lot of these other books that Stephen King or a lot of epic fantasy or whatever, even general fiction. It has a different kind of it has a different feel to it, I guess you can say. And if you're just not into it, or you think, oh, this is just not what I'm expecting, then you can see why it wouldn't be for you. Now, I know I go to a ton of top 10 lists, and depending on who's doing the list, obviously the lists are very subjective. And I know, like when I want a big epic fantasy, I know who I go to for that sort of thing. But I know that, for our tastes align, like if he likes epic fantasy, like it's very likely that I will feel the same way. But then you'll have these divergent opinions suddenly, and you kind of have to understand maybe why it is that someone, what it is about the novels that we do diverge on, and then, learn from there, right? And then when it comes to other kinds of things where I'm looking for the classics, or I'm looking for things from the 1800s, or I'm looking for hard sci-fi, then I go to those people and I know who kind of aligns with some of the same things. Uh for this one, you have to know what you're getting into a little bit. Like if you like fairy tales, within fairy tales, you have to be able to suspend your disbelief a little bit. And that's hard for some people to do because they want everything to be they want everything to be very believable, at least with the characters following their own, being true to their character. And I feel that same way as well. But you also have to understand that silly things happen. And sometimes, like in this book, there's this emphasis on napkins that is early in the book, and then napkins again, and then napkins again, and napkins near the end. And that's just something that happens. If something gets brought up early on in a fairy tale, there was a land and they all grew pickles, right? You have to understand going into it that pickles are going to be a major focus of this whole tale, probably, and that pickles are probably going to be a part of the conclusion. And if you can enjoy that fact, in this case, napkins, and like someone stifling a sneeze is like an edge of the chair moment where in epic fantasy you'd be like, this is the cheesiest, dumbest stuff I've ever seen. But again, it in the same way that maybe people look back and think that Harry Potter is so lame and dumb, but for what it is, and I recently read it with my oldest kid. We read through all of them, and seeing it through her eyes, it does exactly what you would want it to do. It's exactly the right level for, I think it's great for what it is. Even though I don't think Voldemort is the best character, but I think I have the same feeling when I go into some books that, again, are targeted for younger audiences as this one is. Now, it's very interesting because it's for his daughter, and like it talks about a flaccid wiener right near the start, and I thought, that's a strange thing to write in a book that you want your daughter to read. But after that, it's pretty much just a fairy tale, and I wonder why he adds something like that when it just so doesn't need to be a part of it and doesn't serve the rest of the story. And I'm glad that that kind of stuff wasn't in the rest of the story. I hope it won't be in all these books, because it was in The Stand a whole bunch, and I kind of, I just don't love it. But I really liked this book. For me, this book speaks to me more than The Stand did. But I know that The Stand is so amazing and everyone loves it, and I can totally see why. But I am more likely in 5 years to pick this one up because of its tight little story than a grand epic. Now, in this one, the basic story of it's taken too long to get to the basic plot. But the basic story of it is there's this king and named Roland, and he has his wonderful wife, and she's just the best person ever, it seems like. And he's a little bit of a numbskull, like he's a man of the people. And he wants to be among the people. The people love him. They call him Roland the Good, even though he hasn't done anything notable especially, but he's just good. He's a man of the people or whatever. And he has Randall Flagg, the dark magician, as his advisor, as is done in a lot of these fairy tales. And sometimes they're evil and sometimes they're good. And we just know we're getting into that sort of story. Since we already know Randall Flagg, we know what kind of story we're getting into as soon as we see his name. And Roland has 2 kids named Peter and Thomas. And Peter is very much tutored by his mother. She takes that on herself when, usually there's people there for his education and mentorship and whatnot. But she takes this on herself and does a wonderful job and is growing him into this future king that will one day be more than their father Roland. Like, will be this great king and great for the right reasons and whatnot. And it's that kind of story. It's like she's tutoring him for that reason. And Randall Flagg hates this person and needs her out of the spotlight. And she dies giving birth to the younger son, Thomas, who doesn't get the same experience and advantage, I guess you would say, as Peter. And so we have these 2 characters, and one thing I have noticed that I do love about Stephen King's stuff so far, and is a big part of The Stand, and a reason why I loved The Stand, is, it follows Peter, who's this very good, whatever, he's just good. And sometimes that seems boring, but like everyone wants these gray characters. I think that's like the the era we are in is the era of morally gray characters. But if everyone's morally gray, it's like it makes it boring, in my opinion. But we have Peter, who is this good poster boy, good character, and then we have Thomas, who hasn't gotten that same advantage, and so we're viewing some of his things that he's doing, even his terrible things, and we can kind of see him in a light which is maybe a little bit more empathetic than we would see if we didn't know kind of that background of what caused sort of that thing. Like, he's just so filled with jealousy, and his father gives Peter way more attention, and it's just that sort of story. So you can see the writing on the wall that this is not great for our story, that Thomas is going to break, or something's going to happen. And Randall Flagg is preying on that. He's feeding on that. And I think something so good so far in all of the novels that I've read of his, Gunslinger, The Stand, and The Eye of the Dragon, is Randall Flagg's ability to prey on people's insecurities, on their jealousies, on their fears, whatever. And he does that in a number of ways. I think in The Stand, the dichotomy between, like, Harold, who Randall preys on his feelings, and he goes a certain way, and he could have done the same thing for Larry, but Larry kind of goes a different way. And so he's doing that very much on Thomas. Terrible things happen, and I was so dialed in for that first half of the book. Now, you could say that it unravels a little bit in the back half. It adds a lot of new characters suddenly, when I thought we were just going to focus on mainly these people, and it still is the focus, even though kind of coming up into the conclusion, it does open up a broader cast. And if this was written for an adult audience, then I think, he would have made other decisions. But since it isn't, he has to be a little bit more blunt. And since it's a fairy tale, there are certain kinds of conventions that he's following that I really dig. I really loved it. Now, I don't want to get into... anyway, there's a tragedy that happens, and everything gets shaken up, as they do in a book, whether it's fantasy or fairy tale or whatever. And this happens here. And as we get to the conclusion, I think this is the dumbest conclusion. I can't believe, like, this is what we're doing. This is the conclusion that we brought up. And in a way, I still feel that way. But I think it's worth it because I just loved the final couple pages of this book. I did enjoy myself. I did enjoy my time with it the whole way. I did wonder if it was going off the rails for the end, but I just was able to suspend my, understand that this is the kind of story we're in. If I was reading this part to my kids, they would probably be loving it a little bit more than I do, but I'm still, enjoying it for that regard. And I did really find the ending to be quite touching. And maybe it's because I'm a meathead dummy, but I thought it was a wonderful ending, and I really liked it. And it will be, I imagine I will rate it quite highly on my final list of Stephen King novels. I really liked all of them so far, and truly for such different reasons. Very, very different reasons. But yeah, I really liked it. So I will be going into the next one whatever that will be. I don't know if I'm going finally into the Dark Tower. I kind of want to read The Justice of Kings, which is a fantasy novel, Richard Swan. I kind of want to go into that a little bit. I might want to get into, I'm looking at my sci-fi couple floating shells with stuff up there. I might do that, but I'm going to take a sec to decide what I want to do next. But it's been great so far. I've been so pleased. Again, like there are moments in this novel and in his other ones where even though it's spooky and dark, generally, like at the end of chapter 92 or something, he says, like he wishes the reader a pleasant sleep. Like, and he's not doing that ironically. Like it's really sweet. It's really sweet. So I liked it. I think I might not feel the same way about all of these. They might get a little much for me. But I'm surprised. I'm surprised by some of the sensibility that he's taken. And like he allows people to draw their own conclusions, and you can see how he would have a wide audience. Like it sounds sometimes like he's preaching one way or another, and he's being critical of one thing or another, but he does leave things open for a big audience to enjoy, which I really appreciate. And yeah, really interesting that this is an author that I would be like. I didn't think that I would be, but as much as I loved Goosebumps growing up, I think, why didn't I read some of these before? So, talk to you guys later.